Give it a minute. Yeah, we're live. Press the button to do.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. For the sake of time, if staff could note attendance. I'd also like to ask the fellow board members to, if you would hit your button there, and we can make sure I get everyone's questions and concerns. Or, well, I think they all work, but if you had a question or concern or something right up, we'd do that, and that way we can have it all organized. So
I'm still Myers.
we'll figure it out, won't we? So, at any rate.
Okay, I was going to say, Myers, I can take your spot, didn't I? Yes, I
Just
am.
the
My
button.
name is- Oh, the button.
As long as it all works.
It's
So.
a M, it's a M.
So, we are going to start with Judge Tracy Fan with the court section of the budget. Thank you, Judge, for being with us this evening.
No problem. So the court budget is pretty much the same as it traditionally is. The bulk of our budget is with the personnel, with the salaries. And then the rest of the expenses are just pretty much anything you would need to run an office supplies, any forms we need for court. Obviously, we have our appointed counsel, we have conflict judges if there's conflicts, or if I'm gone, judges that fill in for me. And just everything you would need to use, run an office, your postage, your standard equipment, things of that nature. We do have our training account and our travel account that we use for conferences for the judge and myself, and for the staff where they have to attend trainings for their court clerks associations. So if anyone has any questions about anything on the budget, feel free to ask me, or any other questions regarding the budget we've submitted. If you do a comparison to last year's budget, we have cut our budget by over $30,000 for this year. Part of that included taking down a previously budgeted item we had for a part-time employee that has been taken out. So that's not a position that we are asking to fill at this time.
Well, thank you for the introduction there. I did want to mention, that it looks like obviously personnel is the key driver for the expenditures within your budget, and that number has dropped a little bit there. I did want to bring up a question, though, in nature. You brought up a little bit of some of the requirements, maybe, in terms of court clerks. There's been a conversation in regards to bringing up those positions to be replaced by interns or such, and I was kind of curious if that would be a pragmatic approach, especially in regards to some of the requirements. I think you hinted on some of those requirements just briefly earlier.
I know some of these ideas have been tossed around by various people, but, these are people obviously that don't understand the workings of a court and have probably never actually worked in a court. There's a lot of training that goes into training a court clerk. To get their certifications, they're required to attend 100 hours of class training, and they're required to be a court clerk for 4 years to even get their certifications. So they have to be versed in all different laws, and closed records law, sunshine law request. I mean, it's not just you can put someone in there that, works, in the library and suddenly they're a court clerk. It doesn't work like that. We spend a lot of money and a lot of time training these people. So it's very frustrating when we spend all this time and money training these people. They work for us for a few years and they move on. And a lot of reasons why they move on is because they go somewhere else and make more money. So no, it's not a simple solution that we can bring someone in off the street and pay them minimum wage and make them a court clerk. We are not going to be successful doing that. And we are subjecting ourselves to possible lawsuits if they mess something up.
Yeah, and off the top, that was some of the concern that I had just from an outsider on that, and that's why I wanted your opinion on that. I really appreciate your response, and I'm going to make my comment, and I think Alderwoman Mims has one, but I said this last week, all these budgets are bare bone, and so this budget process has obviously been less, I guess, stressful for all of us this year. Alderwoman Mims.
I have a few, is that okay? One is,
what happens to the high volume of warrants? And I guess I want your opinion on it in reviewing the large volume of them that I've seen. That's one of my questions.
Well, as far as the warrants go, obviously, the court issues the warrants. The warrants come from the court, and then it's up to law enforcement to execute on the warrants. I mean, unless someone just comes in the jail to turn themselves in, which rarely happens, but it does happen on occasion, the bulk of people taking care of their warrants is going to be a law enforcement function. That's going to be up to the police department to either, when they stop these people and they have warrants to bring them in, or when they're captured by another agency, like a different city, and they're holding them for us, for our police department to go pick them up. Now, I know since last November, a lot of that has not been occurring, and I can tell you that because I used to get phone calls, every single day from the police department that they had 3 to 5 people in custody. I have not been receiving any of those phone calls since last November. I have received maybe 10 phone calls since November of people that the police department have picked up that are in custody on warrants. So that is not occurring. And obviously, I have no control over that. I have nothing to do with that. That's not my department. That's the police department's issue. However, in an attempt to try to solve some of these issues with these warrants, what I have decided to do during the dockets in September and October, we're going to offer an amnesty program. The city is going to issue a press release regarding this. So any docket in September or October that anyone has a warrant on or owes the city money for a court fine, they can walk in, have their warrant pulled, come see me, we will cancel their warrant, deal with their case, and hopefully get them re-engaged on their cases so that either they can dispose of their cases so we can get rid of some of these warrants, or in the alternative, if they owe money, to get them back on a payment plan so that we can be bringing this revenue back into the city. But other than that, that's about all I can do as the judge for these warrants.
Okay, the next one I got is, what are the needs that you have to operate on an efficient level?
Well, I mean, I think the court runs as efficiently as it can, given the circumstances that we have. I mean, we don't issue the citations. We don't bring the tickets forward. That's done by law enforcement. So whatever were brought, that's what we do. So I don't know that there's anything else we can do on our end, on the court's end, to help with anything other than what we're currently doing.
And then my other one, and then I got one more. I know we're on a multiple years of our falling revenue. Are we not?
The revenue is going to be declining as long as we are not issuing as many tickets. I mean, if the police department doesn't issue as many tickets, obviously that's going to have an inverse effect on the amount of revenue that's brought in. You have more tickets, you're going to have more revenue. You have less tickets, you're going to have less revenue. It's just the way it is.
And I know people think that for your liability insurance in your department, different. It's on a different policy than everybody else. But my question is, isn't it under the same as everyone?
Yeah, the city deals with, like our utilities, the phone services, all of the things like that. That's all done through the citywide, and then each department is told what their portion of that is, and then we have to include that in our budget.
And what can we as a board help? What can we do to help stabilize your department, which the needs, we know, keep changing?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. I mean, I have the smallest budget in the entire city, and I look at it like, well, if I can cut my budget by this amount, then everyone, with the smallest budget, if I can manage to shave off $30,000, then I think other departments should, have the same responsibility to try to, curb their expenses or whatever that may be. Although, that's not my job to worry about what the other departments do. As a taxpayer, that does concern me in an aspect, because I feel like if I'm cutting all my costs and everything I can to save the city money, is that just going to go to another department? And if so, then that's kind of penalizing myself or my department to try to save money. So that is a worry to me as a department head.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming tonight, Tracy. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Judge fan.
You're welcome.
This is a difficult subject matter. The fact that you touched on it and you can't control the revenue stream. I understand that, but you made the cover sheet of Michael's top concerns, and the fact that the receipts are down $215,000. So, I mean, I understand if they don't walk through that door, you can't send them to the PayPal and collect $200 and let them on their way. I mean, we've talked about maybe some thoughts and what we can do, but that number's gonna, I guess my point and question is, at what point in time, if we lock in the fact that your receipts may never get to that level again, if there's not changes within SB, that's one of your issues. And
That's a very small portion of why the revenues are down. Number one, the court did not do those revenue projections. The previous finance manager did those projections. I was never asked about those projections. Those were done by the finance department previously.
that was kind of the direction I was going to go. At what point in time do we dismiss and that being in bold and going, because I don't want to see that number, well, maybe I won't see that number again next year, but I mean, that's something that you can't control. So at what point in time do we count that as unobtainable funds? Does that make sense?
Well, I think part of the issue is, last year when the police department, I met with them when they told me they were going to cut the booking department. I told them that was a horrible idea, that they should not do that. That's not a feasible solution to their budget because, if they're not going to bring people in on warrants, then nobody's going to go to court. And, they decided to do that anyway. That was the decision they made. And when I walked into that meeting, I knew that this was what was going to end up happening, that somehow that their decision was going to be put on me as the court, that somehow it was my fault, that now, these people weren't being brought into custody and they weren't collecting these funds, and now it's going to be the court's problem. I don't see it that way. The court was never supposed to be a revenue maker. Yes, revenue is a byproduct of the court, absolutely, but that is not the court's primary function.
I view, and I agree 100% with how you just outlined that, and the fact that there's and there's community development too, that's out issuing citations, that those people have to walk through the door for us to collect the money as well. So that adds to that figure as well. So as I look at all the cooperative functions, I think decisions have led, just like you said, to that number being isolated as uncollected revenues. Can you help me, as we're out in the community development enforcement world, neighborhood services, how many of those folks that get a citation don't appear here?
As far as neighborhood services?
Percentage-wise.
Probably 30%, 30 to 40%.
So then those go to warrants
Yes.
too, as well,
Always go to
right?
warrant, yes. Well, summons first and then warrant.
Is part of that due to the fact, that, in your opinion, some of them are out-of-town landlords? Because they're the ones that are getting the citations, not the tenants, so to speak, in the rental properties. I mean, as a homeowner, if I don't do it right, as a homeowner, I'm going to get
Some of them are absentee landlords, yes,
Yeah.
out of state, some are. But not all. I mean,
Right.
that's probably a small percentage, but that is an issue, yes, absolutely.
Aren't you glad you came tonight? No, I'm done. I appreciate your honesty. Thanks.
All right. Does anyone have any further questions by chance?
I just want to thank you for coming in.
Yes. Thank you, Judge,
All right,
and
you're welcome.
appreciate the insight.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Okay. All righty. Let's see, we got EMS with our director, Mr. Doug Jonassy. How are you? Thank you for being here.
Good evening.
If you can give us maybe a quick little intro rundown, and then we can go to some questions.
All righty, I'll be glad to. Our budget is actually pretty flat this year. You'll note in the personnel services that it's combining the general fund as well as the public safety sales tax portions. If you compare it to last year's combined personnel services, we're just a hair over $5,000 less in our budget request for personnel services this year. The reason for that is in the year before last, we actually took quite a hit in the overtime department due to 3 significant FMLA leaves. The following year's estimate was a little bit on the high side. I think we've got it trimmed down to a better estimate for what we're actually going to experience based on fiscal 18 to date. In the supply services and charges, we have a couple of small decreases and a couple of increases. The most significant of which is we're asking for $3,000 more in the operating supplies department, just anticipating prices to go up in medical supplies. Also, we have anticipated an increase in, it's labeled collection agency, but it's actually for our billing agency, an increase there. If that increased expenditure actually occurs, that means that revenue will offset it by a factor of 16 to 1, because that's what we pay our billing agency, is 1/16 of what they collect. So the other increases are very small, $150 in office supplies. This is principally due to increased usage of our copier due to cleaning up old accounts from the prior billing agency that were kind of left hanging in limbo. We've reduced our uniform request in the general fund. We're just using fewer different items of uniforms, so we're scaling that back a little bit. The price of our scheduling software as well as telemetry to the hospitals is going up a little bit, so we're asking for $367 more in that account. Memberships have gone up a little bit. Our student liability insurance previously was just taken non-specifically out of professional services. We're now adding that as a separate line item. This is for the liability insurance for the EMT students who ride out on the ambulance with us as part of their education. And then the general liability insurance is what it is. It has gone up this year. Finance, based on fiscal 18, is expecting a lower amount of bank charges, so we have reduced that by $500. Of note, in the repairs and maintenance section, the only line item that we're requesting a change for is fuel. This is due to the increasing price of fuel. When the estimates were made that led to the current year's budgeted amount, the price of fuel was considerably lower. We have also taken a diesel burner out of the fleet and replaced it with a gas burner, and that uses more fuel by volume. So we also anticipate replacing another diesel with a gas burner in the present cycle, so they're just not making the chassis we need with diesels anymore. That's why we're doing that. So we've got an estimate that I believe will be very, very close to a very close approximation to actual use. The public safety sales tax request is the same. The capital sales tax request is very modest, as we're not budgeting for a new ambulance in fiscal 19. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to thank you for the great detail going through there. I do have a couple quick questions, if you don't mind. And one of my questions, Alderwoman Mims, I think, shared with me was that on the printing and promotions, and there's two questions associated with this under that. The publications, that's an $8,400 expense. Could I get some more details
Certainly.
on that, please?
That is just how that particular expense was characterized when it was first put on the budget. Those are actually textbooks for the EMT students. They pay for those as part of their tuition and fee. So there is offsetting revenue to that, but that expense, the
Is reimbursed?
publications, it is reimbursed, but those are textbooks that are nearly $300 a piece.
And I imagine the community education, that's just $950. Does that have to do with the child care or the child seating program? Is
No,
that something
is,
else?
Some of that may come out of that. Principally, the training for the child safety seats will come out of professional development. Some of that is occasionally offset by grant funding. The safety seats themselves are grant funded.
Okay.
The other promotional expenditures are like the things that you see on the table when we're at the safety fair or whatnot. You know, the canned koozies and coloring books and what have you, to give out to members of the public at public education events. It also helps offset the cost of some of the requests we get for actual training classes for the public.
So that the community education piece, okay, so that could be several different
Yes.
smaller expenditures.
Right.
Okay. Can I also assume that the $1,825 for GPS, that's for the servicing, correct, of the GPS units?
The subscription cost.
Yeah, I've been asking that with every department.
Right.
I've been consistent with last week and this week to make sure we get that clear and concise amongst everybody. But at any rate, would my fellow board members have any questions by chance? Ms. Mims?
Mr. Jonas, one of my questions is, do you have to upgrade your radios annually or as much as another department we have?
Well, I mean, all of the radios that we have will have to be P25 compliant by the end of the coming year or the beginning of 2021. I would have to ask dispatch for the exact date. But the system that we're on it's Kansas City's radio system that we subscribe to, there is a cutoff date after which your non-compliant radios just aren't going to work anymore. So all of our portable radios have already been replaced. We have 4 or 5 mobile radios yet to be replaced. We have put that as an item in the capital sales tax budget for the coming year. Once that is done, until the next time the system changes, we're good.
Okay. And with the new collection agency and the system that we're using, are we recuperating our costs?
Okay, the new collection agency just started, the delinquent accounts collection. So there hasn't been enough time to note what their activity has been. I mean, they just started. They got their first collection file like yesterday. But with them, I mean, there is no expense associated with them unless they collect. They take their cut off of what is actually collected. With the billing agency, they seem to be, at present, doing a bit better than the prior.
Thank you. Thank you,
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Mims. Alderman Frank Hunt.
Hello.
Evening.
Workers' compensation, have we been able to lower that due to the fact that we put all that wonderful equipment on lifts coming up into the,
That would be, I would have to defer to HR or whoever puts that in there. That's not something that we actually deal with on a hands-on basis. Those numbers get plugged in by somebody else.
I just thought you would be saving thousands and thousands of dollars in that area.
Oh, we have not had injuries to speak of. So eventually that word will get to the insurance folks.
I would imagine that the overtime isn't as bad either when you've got employees that are not hurt due to lifting.
It helps to keep people healthy, it certainly does. We are down 2 paramedics from just vacancies right
Okay.
now. But, and soon to be down a third. But so far, everybody's healthy.
Thank you.
And I'd like to also say that obviously a large majority of your budget is again, personnel, like it was with the previous department. I mean, that's a huge majority of it. Again, extremely lean, and to be frank, this EMS department's budget's been extremely lean for several years, not just the past couple. But I appreciate your candor and your answers coming in this evening. I also appreciate the org chart you provided. I think all of us do, considering that kind of like to see the organization of things and how the responsibilities, what category and what individual they shift to. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
And you can always come and ride with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hopefully in the front, not in the back.
Yeah, right. Good one. Yeah, sitting up. Yeah. All righty. We go to Finance Citywide with Mr. Keeman. Thank you.
Good evening. As far as the citywide budget, comparing to last year, you may notice there's a significant increase of around $226,000. And that relates to one item, if you will, and it's a budgeting of a transfer to the TIF fund for some anticipated possible shortfalls in revenues that had not been budgeted that way in previous years. Also, change in the way unemployment was budgeted. We're budgeting unemployment for all departments within the citywide department as the city maintains the risk for all departments. So in lieu of budgeting smaller amounts in each department, we consolidated and budgeted unemployment on one line item within this department. Other than that, the other expenditures are similar to what they were last year. You may note the election that we just had. There's some costs related to that have been budgeted. Any questions that I might be able to answer as far as the citywide budget?
Yes, sir. I had a couple questions, and at one point I'd also like to kind of get the opinion of some of our fellow board members up here to see what they think on a suggestion I'm going to make here in a second. But before I get to that, I would like to, and I know last year we cut the city newsletter down significantly, and so that $20,000 budgeted for that newsletter that goes towards 2 newsletters, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
just wanted to confirm that again, because that was one of those little smaller items that we found a little bit of savings last year. Advertising for open positions, $2,500. Is it possible if I can get just a little bit of insight on in terms of that?
Human Resources advertises for all open positions within the city. There are some requirements that we advertise in more than one. We try to use online services also, but there are requirements. We advertise in The Call and Dos Mundos. There are some specific
Okay, so
requirements that we have to do.
there's also some legal aspects as well
That's
in terms of where you have to post those. So that explains some of those expenditures. And I think we ran maybe some Facebook stuff too. I believe saw something
We
online.
try to utilize online,
Yeah. Okay.
but we still have the requirement of, just like I do for public notices, there's still a requirement to advertise in certain
Yeah,
papers.
and I appreciate the clarification on that, because that's something, obviously, there's no choice on you, that's what it is, that's correct. I do have a question, and I brought this up last year, and I'm kind of curious what the fellow committee members think, and then later on, if it so desires, that the actual rest of the board would think. We spend $9,000 live streaming the meetings online, but yet we still spend over $6,000 associated with the Comcast situation. When you have many cable providers in the community, I feel like my personal opinion is that I know it's a $6,000 expenditure, but it is one that I think that very, very few utilize, and it makes me wonder if our money could be better spent in other places than hitting that extremely, what I feel, small target audience. We spend like the live streaming meetings, I think, with the age we're in, I think that is an amazing service we provide. My personal feeling is that the money towards the Comcast situation may be something that we can look at dissolving. And if anyone has any questions, and I think maybe Mr. Myers does, or comments regarding this. Mr. Myers?
On the Comcast situation, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Well, we've had the buzzards fly over the Comcast discussion since I've been on the board. And your point of how many people is, when Comcast was the only show in town, it made sense. But as more and more providers have come into Raytown, I'm talking about cable providers, they don't offer that service. It's just Comcast exclusive. It's been a difficult subject to address. I mean, Ms. Mims immediately hit her light, so I think I know where she may be going in that regard. If we're servicing 50 people, we're servicing 50 people. We're servicing 50 citizens. And what? And she wants to remind me that they're voters. That's not really they pay taxes. That would be what my thought process would be. If it's 50 viewers at $6,000, that's an expensive expenditure for any one taxpayer. But there's many things that come out of that service as far as what we're doing, how to get services provided for the city, things that maybe they don't have computers. They're not, if my mom and dad were alive, live stream, what is that, in Branson? Is that where you fish there? I mean, and there's people that are older population that don't live stream. They just don't. But they have some interest in what's going on in the city. So that has been the discussion and challenge that we've addressed in regards to Comcast. And I don't know that we're going to get any farther in dissecting whether that's a justifiable expense for 20 people or 50 people or 100 people. I guess at some point in time you have to look at the expense and look who you're serving and you make a conclusion on that. So, you know what I'm saying? Does that totally confuse you and not answer your question? I think I just did.
You did really well dancing around it. Alderwoman Mims.
Well, you know what, this is going to be almost a love affair tonight, because I do have to agree with him, but we have a base out here that they look at this more than we realize. And if you want the information out correctly, instead of the misnomers that has happened, and we all have felt what has happened. Trust me, we have. And I looked at, and I'm right on the line between Comcast and Spectrum. Comcast is cheaper. And there's a lot of more services that are also provided here in Comcast, is when I look at it and have dealt with some of the areas. For a lot of our families that they give services to our students. Some of it is free of charge if the folks really knew how to go and get it. So I'm one of those AARP people, and I do look at what the service is. And for a lot of people that can't even get to it, it's making sure that we get the information to them, just like tonight. So I'm one for making sure we keep it out there, especially when it comes to how, we don't have a newspaper anymore. How do we reach the people? And a lot of them do look at it. So you want me to stop there and wait for you to go further?
No, I appreciate everyone's opinions.
Is that
and
done?
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
I got my questions.
Oh, well, I tell you what, I think we'll have Alderman Hunt comment, and then
Okay.
we'll jump to you, Alderman Mims. All right, Alderman Frank Hunt.
You know, I heard on the radio today, just driving around the car, an ad for the Carnegie Park weekend coming up. I also saw an ad on one of the channels on TV in regards to, I can't remember the subject matter, but it was pertaining to Raytown. And so we are getting some other soft messages spoken, and I don't think we've made much of an effort to get out there or price that comparison. We've got to attach ourselves as Raytown with something and someone until we do get a paper or get some other means of communication. I agree with the fact that Comcast is an easy source for us old folks. And, I'm seeing young people up here on the board, and they probably don't take the time to get this same kind of coverage. So I think making this change is a monumental change.
I have DirecTV, so I don't get an opportunity to even do that. And this, honestly, those that probably hung around, I know some of the other aldermen know this ain't the first time we probably brought this up. But at any rate, we'll digress. Alderman Mims.
Okay. I think y'all missed me last week. Is that what it is? Okay, here I go. And looking at next year for our auditing, do we have any idea who we're going to be looking for? And is this something that we're going to bid out?
I believe it's Meishauser again, and I believe it's the third year of their contract.
Okay.
I don't know if it's just a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract. If indeed it is a 3-year contract, we will bid those services out after the audit is completed for the 17-18 fiscal year.
Okay. And my next question real quickly is, how can we incorporate a state audit into our city budget? And would it be appropriate to add it to our finance department's budget? And like looking at a ballpark amount that it would cost us. And the reason for this question is because this is something that should be prioritized to increase efficiency among city operations.
I believe in past experience, when I've been associated with other municipalities have undergone a state audit, again, we'd have to get an estimate from the state auditor as to what those costs are. And again, I've seen where they've ranged from $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the entity and the size of the entity. So that's what I can offer.
I know, and trust me, I just wanted to put that out for the record because I do know, I think that this is something that's beneficial to us, but I'm going to move on. The other one is the monthly postage. And is there a typo? And then my other thing is, is this something we should do annually?
was you referring to?
You're in citywide? Sorry, we're not seeing the line item.
I just want to know what other methods we could use in handling this, but I don't care, just long as it's something,
I'm trying to see what you're referring to, so I can,
I was on the postage piece, but that's okay.
the
Let me
city
strike-
newsletter postage. I believe those are the costs associated with the biannual newsletter and the
Sewer bill.
related postage to send
Sewer
those
bill.
out to the residents.
Yeah, sewer bill. My-
Oh,
Sorry, you're in the finance section or this citywide? I'm sorry.
I was in finance. No, I was in finance citywide. I was in one of
Oh,
those.
this is at-
I wrote
this
all my
20,000.
questions after looking at it.
City newsletter postage here in the
Yeah, I think some of
You said
them
where?
jumping back and
I
forth.
looked at both. Yes,
Yeah,
I
some of
did.
this was the finance, since it's kind of the same
Right.
topic, but yeah.
Yeah, our postage and finance is related to the sewer billing and some of the different expenses thereof. The one in citywide, we do have to pay for the printing company to distribute the quarterly newsletters or the 2 newsletters we've scheduled for this year. So that's what the postage is on that one.
Okay, thank you. And I'm done with my questions on this one. Thank you, Mr.
Jumped over to the.
Alderman Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a few hiccups with the mailing, did we not, on the city newsletter? Did we maybe come to that conclusion that not every of them reached their destination?
We asked for an assessment, and it wasn't as great as what we thought, but there were some residents who, for whatever reason, didn't get the newsletter as we had hoped. Yes, that is correct.
Did they say they didn't get it? So they
Yes.
were able to come up and get one, or we mailed one to them, or took care of them, I'm sure.
There were copies that they could come get at City Hall, yes, and that came to our attention because they mentioned that. But we did do spot checks within the majority of our various neighborhoods to see that we didn't have a large section of the community, and those that we identified, we tried to reconcile that with them.
I'm sure we took care of them. That's a good thing. And it's a good thing that they're coming up and saying, hey, I didn't get my newsletter. So it's kind of interesting. Mr. Keenan, we attempt to hover around the 17% range for the reserve amount for our general fund. That's a template for our, I think that's an ordinance, the way we
That's correct.
yeah. As we project, are we anticipating having any wiggle room, maybe a little bit of an increase in that number?
I think when you look at the general fund balance, our projections are, again, through when we were preparing this budget, subject to change in actual numbers, is the general fund was going to have a positive increase of approximately 400,000. That's if our crystal ball is correct as we project out through, but that's our best estimate based on the data that we have. If you look at the total fund balance of the general fund on the budget schedule here, it's anticipated that let me get to the page that we're on here. On the summary page of the overall general fund budget, we're projecting to have a fund balance of around 3.9 million, assuming that the 400,000 actually materializes. And you look at the total amount of that as compared to the percent of actual expenditures, then the general fund balance is approximately 32%. So I think you're well over your 17%. However, that's a contingency reserve that's not really supposed to be used. So you really got to, I think that the intent was to not consider that to be available other than on extreme emergency.
Right.
So if you're looking at excluding that, you're right at 15 to 16% of current budgeted expenditures for next year as far as fund balance. Am I answering your question?
Well, I wanted to go back to the 400,000. That caught my attention, but I think you just told me in reality, we shouldn't be going there. Is that?
No, I'm not.
Said it.
I'm saying we're projecting
An
revenues
increase.
over expenditures of 402,000
Okay, okay.
for this current fiscal year.
Right, right.
Added to the balance that was already there at the beginning of the year at 3.5 million.
Okay, okay.
Projects that the unrestricted available fund balance to be 3.9 million. However, of that amount, according to your ordinance, 17% of your current revenues would be a contingent reserve. So I wouldn't count that as being available.
Okay, well, I
So
guess
we've met the goal of 17%. We've exceeded it by, I don't have the actual dollar amount because it's based on total revenues of the 17%. But I think it was approximately 2 million last year. Just throwing out, just a rough number.
if we brought up the conversation again of trying to find COLA, cost of living adjustments for our employees, and obviously last year there weren't any. There wasn't much fat on the bone in any place here last year. A 1 or 2%. Do you see anywhere in the budget that we could introduce the idea of issuing those again this year?
Again, when you look at the goals, my understanding was to have a balanced budget.
Yeah.
So if that the goal is the case, then you'd have to have a 1 or 2 or 3%. You'd have to reduce budgeted expenditures by that amount. Or if you so chose, you could use fund balance as fund balance appropriated, which is commonly used to balance the budget. But it would be for the amount, the total of the COLA. So you would budget just to use the fund balance for the COLA increase. Now, as you know, that will carry forward the year, next year and the year after. So at some point, you'd have to look at, under the balanced budget approach, reducing expenditures or increasing revenues.
We're all about increasing revenues.
Well,
I'll take that conversation on any day.
I believe we had the answer to that earlier this month. But some combination of the two. When you're looking at that, also you should probably, when you budget these expenditures, you generally don't reach your budget exactly. I mean, you're always under budget somewhere. It might be in personnel because there's vacancies throughout the year, and you budgeted 100% employment. Well, that doesn't always happen, so you have some savings there. You may have some savings in repair, maintenance, other items that could make up for that difference if you budgeted a COLA.
I think you wanted, I think, and I wrote it down on last week's sheets, and I apologize, but I want to say you told us a 1% would have a budget impact of 86,000. Is that I'm going off?
That's correct. 86,000.
Wow, I remembered that.
However, that's across funds. So the general fund impact
1%,
is around 72,000.
What was that now?
The general fund impact is 72,000. The park fund is around 5,500. And the sewer fund is around 8,500. So the actual effect on the general fund would be the 7,200 on a 1% increase.
If at some point in time you could put an email together on that, just that 1 to 2% and the breakdown that you just highlighted to me, I'd appreciate that, because we'll probably have some more discussion, I would think, at some point in time. Oh, I just asked Ms. Mims' question. I'm sorry. My bad.
That was last week, that's good.
So, maybe that's where that surfaced from. Yeah, Frank, you asked that question, didn't you? The COLA question last week, yes? No?
Yes.
It was covered.
So, yeah, Mike mentioned it last week. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, Alderwoman Mims.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan, because you hit on what I had last week down. But I guess when Alderman Myers just brought that up, that triggered something else, because if we don't look at some type of COLA here, we fell behind, we're gonna continue to fall behind. So that's when he brought that question up. I want to thank him for that one. I don't know what the silver, when you said silver fund, I understand general, the parks, and I don't know what silver is.
Oh, I said sewer?
I thought that's what silver. Sewer.
Sewer.
Are we back to that darn sewer again? Okay, I'm sorry, sewer. I was trying to go to the silver hair people. Okay, I'm
That's
so
that new
sorry.
fund that we just have.
Oh, Lord help us.
No,
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
And the other one was, I did have another one, and it just went, I got a brain for it just now. Never mind. Thank you.
First off, I'd like to say thank you for the questions from everyone about the how the reserve fund actually works and things such as that, with the 17% that we have to keep and maintain, and try to also build that back up, because that obviously was an issue with it dwindling away over a course of past several years until we balanced the budget. I did want to bring up just a suggestion, maybe something to think about, because obviously the goal for us is to try to have a balanced budget. We obviously last year froze COLA, and that was something that I spoke about as well. I know others had some thoughts on that as well. And it creates a situation with trying to keep and retain talent if you don't do something, especially if it's 2 years in a row now. I'd also like to throw something maybe to add on Alderman Myers' point. I guess he requested something to be sent out to the whole board concerning what the actual cost would be for a 1%, 2%, or 3% there. But in an effort to keep the budget balanced, I'd also like to suggest something of maybe like a one-time bonus or something, as opposed to a COLA, if we're not able to do that, if that makes any sense at all, and maybe kind of play with some numbers on terms of what that amount might be. I know anything would help. So if we're not able to do a COLA, maybe we can look at those types of options as well, and have something maybe presented to the entire board so that they can make up their mind on what they wish to do, so that we can try to ensure we have a balanced budget. So at any rate, thank you for the conversation. Does anyone have anything else they would like to add to the actual citywide portion? No? Okay, and we can go ahead and move on to the actual finance. I know we dipped in some of those questions a little bit earlier too, which I see it's kind of the same topic, obviously. But I did want to ask a question, jumping into that, on the audit, and Alderman Mims spoke about that as well, on the actual budgeted annual audit. My question is do you feel that this 23,890, that's a safe number on what that expenditure will cost us, correct?
I believe it's
Yeah, but-
contractually.
Okay, so that's already been
agreed
locked.
upon.
That's already been locked in then?
Yes.
Okay, because that's what I was curious about. And to follow up, I know there's been conversation of the state audit, bringing that forth and such. That's, on a personal note, a couple years ago, I emailed the state auditor, and the office told me there's two ways it could be brought up: whether a governor initiates it, which ain't going to happen, or a petition. Being a fourth-class city, counties have certain leverages and luxuries in certain respects that we don't have. That's what the state auditor's office told me in 2015 when I sent that email. At any rate, you feel like that would estimate around 50 to 100. You'd have that's really kind of, that state sets that rate, correct?
Yeah, the state sets that rate, again, based on them coming in. And their audit has different objectives.
Yeah, it's
than
more
a
like
financial-
practices and things such as
Financial
that.
statement audit,
Yeah.
that's correct. And they can go back however number of years, again, depending on what the petition is related to. Again, so I think you'd have to get an estimate from the state as to what amount that would be. What I told you about are the experiences I've had as external auditor for other cities that have had a state audit that we were the auditors on. And that's the cost that they let me know.
I'm curious, on the state audit, because that's more of a comprehensive audit in some respects than the actual annual audit. Wouldn't you think so, or?
I don't know what, they have a different method of what to do. A financial audit is to address
Just the finances, just the
opinion
numbers.
on the fairness of the financial statement and to report on internal controls and compliance with laws and regulations. That's not the objective of a state audit.
I see, and I was just curious on those comprehensive ones. I guess, obviously, if there was a petition process, they'd have to outline exactly what, my imagination is what they would be auditing. I'm just curious if there was even any private entities that offered that service, just me thinking out loud, but Alderwoman Mims, sure.
On the state auditor, which a lot of the things that have fallen on this board, they will be, it's very comprehensive. They will tell you what has happened, some of it you know, but it would tell us where the weak areas are, some of the things that have happened, which got us to where we are. They'll also break it down for you. Trust me, and I've been through 2 of these. It's not fun, but what I'm saying to you, it will let us know where we need to, where the things that we need to look forward to and to make those type of changes. So when I tell you about a state audit, it does all of those entities that you're talking about. As being a 4th-class city, that you can look at doing a petition piece if you want to, but it's very simple. If the board made that motion and sent what they wanted out of this audit, all the rest of that you're talking about would be mute.
Well, because that's the point of clarification I had, because in 2015, I was told that it has to go through a petition process or the governor.
It can, but it's difficult when you do that. You can do that, but it's very simple. If the board made that decision and moved forward to them and requested what it was they want from the state auditors, and they will tell you how much it's going to cost. They will come back and tell you when they're coming in, and they will address those concerns.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Myers.
Thanks for clarifying that. I guess my thought on it, if the board directed that, then if there's funds involved to the magnitude that we're talking about, those need to be budgeted. And if we're talking about $100,000, and it's always priorities,
That's what I said.
it's always going to be a priority situation. Well, some other priority that a department is brought forward is no longer going to be. We're at the point where we're shuffling shells. So I understand your point. So it would be a budgetary request and an item that the board would have to decide if we're going to throw $50,000 or $100,000 at, and what in lieu of what we would have to do that
Now, I
with.
think if we look at it coming from a perspective of the board, opposed to the community going out gathering all those signatures and forcing us to do it anyway, we're going to have to find the money whichever way it goes. So instead of letting somebody take the initiative on us, that we do it ourselves. I'm just throwing it out there to say so that we can get this taken care of, shut everybody down, everybody that's out there, and take care the negative part off for us. That's all I'm saying.
I appreciate the candor from everybody. Was there anything else we had to go forward on the finance? Obviously, another very lean budget. All right. Well, thank you very much for the information. We appreciate it. Yeah, that was the finance. So we got finance and citywide. We're done. Unless, was there another question? Oh, that governing body will be next under admin, governing body, and law. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and jump to that with Ms. Wilson. Thank you.
Your administrative budget doesn't have any real exciting points to it. As you can see, the change from last year is a negative 1.39%. I'll take any questions you have about the administrative budget for conscientious of time right now.
Alderwoman Mims?
Is it possible? Oh, The easiest up is to give her my 3 questions to.
Oh, I'm fine with, yeah, just whatever, because it's broken out in different sections, obviously, so yeah, go right ahead.
Can I give you the questions and then you can deal with it? Are we missing the election expenses in the section for next April? Then the other, but I'll send this to you, Missy. Is the cleanup coupon expense in line with the historical expenses? Administration department is very lean, and can we as a board what can we do as a board for the morale of the city employees? The reason why I brought that question up was I have been, and I just want you all to know, I've been going to different departments and asking, what is it that we need to do as a board to assist with what's going on? And the things that I got, the 2 top things was the morale in City Hall and communication. And so, that's what I got. And I just want to thank you all for allowing me to use my voice tonight, and I'm going to go soak the throat.
Very quickly, to answer your question about the election, yes, we do have the April election covered in the budget. And I can answer the other 2 questions. I'll answer that to the board as a whole. So if you'll email me your questions, I'll respond to everybody as a whole with those. Thank you.
Very good. There was a question that Ms. Mims did hit on that I had in my notes as well about the citywide cleanup coupons. She asked if that was consistent with last year, and that was a $22,000 expenditure. Is that correct?
Actually, we had done the adjustment on that one to address the reality of how much we are having right now. By combining some funds, because we have always under budgeted that.
Yeah.
And so talking with Mr. Hodges and his staff, it came to our attention we needed to increase that. So that's why that's a little bit greater than in the years past.
Well, that's good that folks are utilizing that. That's a good service that we do provide that in a time that we've been limiting and cutting services. So if it's okay, I'd like to kind of go off a little bit what Alderman Mims was saying. If it's okay with you guys, if anyone else has any questions between admin, governing body, and law, I would like to make a comment that contrary to public opinion, there was no great increase in pay for your public officials, and that there are no trips to Tantera and of that nature. Yeah, so I would like to just state that. But at any rate, Alderman Myers, do you have a question?
Yeah, one brief one. And I would welcome all the board members. They've got some questions of the Finance Committee. Certainly, reach out. We're the sounding board in that regard. So be happy to bring your questions forward to the powers to be. So thank you.
As for the law expense, if you don't mind me jumping around, just real quick, do you feel like the 92,150 is that for all of our legal budget for the year?
Yes, sir.
Do you feel like
That is for all of ours, and we will do the best to stay within that number. And it is a little tight, we understand, but we're also hoping that we're not under subject of litigation very often, so.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I looked at that and I circled that in my notes when I was going through it. That's pretty tight. So, at any rate. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions between the admin, governing body, law? All righty, and just real brief, if you folks don't mind sending out an email to the staff, or excuse me, to the board, letting us know our options on the COLA, and maybe the bonus thing, if that could provide maybe an alternative solution to try to find something, at least something to do, considering we're trying to balance the budget. So, at any rate, with any other questions?
I did want to make sure to
yes.
thank the finance staff and Michael for all the hard work they've put into
Yes.
this and answer your questions, because we do get a lot by email, and they've been very responsive to you all. And I think they've put it in a format that you found very easy to understand and follow, correct?
Yes. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Make a motion to adjourn? So moved. All right. Do we need to take a vote on that? Are we good? All right. 10 till 10. Okay. So moved. Aye. Everyone aye?
Yep.
All right. Thank you.